This episode is sponsored by Tattoo Away, the innovative solution for safe and effective tattoo removal. Unlike traditional laser methods, Tattoo Away uses a non-laser technique called transepidermal pigment release, or TEPR, to gently lift and remove tattoo ink from the skin. This method is effective on all ink colors and is suitable for all skin types, minimizing the risk of scarring and promoting healthier skin. With over 8,000 treatments completed worldwide, Tattoo Away has a proven track record of success. If you are considering tattoo removal, revision, or cover-up, visit tattooaway.com to find a location near you and schedule a free consultation. I also want to mention that I'm personally going to go through the process of removing a tattoo with Tattoo Away. I've had this tattoo on my leg since I was very young. It's kept me from wearing shorts due to the affiliation and its size. Honestly, it's a risk to my life just showing it, so I'm finally taking action. The people behind Tattoo Away are incredible. Some of them now I consider friends, and together we're working on some meaningful projects. This partnership is important specifically because one of our goals is to get this into the prisons, to have the opportunity for prisoners to remove their tattoos that could hinder them from getting a job or put them at risk once they're out. So thank you guys for considering Tattoo Away. If you want me to personally connect you with them, feel free to reach out to me at carlosvasquez@howtobattle.com. I'll make sure you get what you need, or you can visit tattooaway.com for more information. Thank you, and enjoy the episode.
I'm not what happened to me. I'm what I choose to become. Alisa Sieber, what does that mean to you?
The thing that I hit most on is the fact that I do not feel like I've chosen who I've become. I feel like most of my life has been a byproduct of choices being taken away from me. And so I think it's less of who I choose to become, but more how I choose to interpret what I am.
Interesting. I like that perspective. Welcome everybody to the How to Battle podcast. Today we have an incredible guest, a woman that I met at an event in LA. And I feel like when I met you, we just kind of exchanged conversation, and it was meaningful conversation. And we felt we were in an environment with a lot of, like, I would say, uppity people. And we kind of like stood out in a way, like, what are we doing here? We didn't, I'm kind of, everybody knows my story and where I come from. And then I saw you and your friend, and we were having a conversation, and it just went from there. And we're here today talking about you and your story and your life and your message. And I got to know you, aside from there, you came and saw a play. And so I know something about you, but I don't know everything. So a lot of this is going to be new to me as well. And I kind of wanted to wait for this opportunity to get to know you. But I know you have a story of overcoming battles in your life, dealing with adversity, maybe still going through some stuff in your life. But that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
Is this a platform where people can talk about real life experiences, real life hardships and overcoming of those, and still overcoming them for some. So please just tell us more about yourself. Start where you feel in your heart you need to start. We'll go from there.
Yeah, I guess I could start with what I was doing there that night. And I met you. And that was a really interesting place for me to be as well. And I definitely feel on the outside of so many communities and different groups. And every time I go into an event where there's networking involved, I'm always just looking for like that one spark of connection, because who I am today is somebody that I have a lot of complications within me. And I have a lot of things that I want to accomplish, and I have a lot of experience, and I have a lot of ability, but how I end up bringing that to the world is constantly evolving based on the kind of conversations that I have. And I think that today I'm sitting here as somebody with a huge resume of a past, everything from being active duty military since I was 17. I flew C-130 aircraft for the Marine Corps. I was a sexual assault response coordinator and victims advocate under the Trump presidency. I became a mother, was going to go into the airlines, but the pandemic threw me and my family into an overall upheaval. And I even worked in virtual reality tech design for a while. All of that is not who I am. I think if you were to ask, who am I today? I'm somebody looking to use my voice. I've always been a writer. I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a partner, but I'm somebody that's creatively trying to find purpose in this world.
So you said you dealt with some struggles in your life, right? What are some of those struggles that you've dealt with or still deal with?
I think the biggest one that comes to mind is just mental health. And I think with my experience as a Marine, and especially as a pilot, somebody that in order to fly an aircraft, whether you're in the military or in the civilian world, which I was going to go into, you can't have any sort of mental health issues. You can't have the need for something as simple as Zoloft because you can put, your crew and the passengers aboard potentially in theory, so they might suggest at risk. But what ends up happening is you end up burying all of that pain and that trauma and that discomfort and that constant stress. And without a safe place for it to be explored or healed from, it just ends up building this tension that can eventually erupt. And that's ultimately what I went through, was that eruption of everything I had been burying.
And did that happen when you were in the military or out of the military?
No, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was very structured, and I operated in that. And that's what attracted me to the Marine Corps when I was 17. This idea of coming from chaos. I grew up in an okay family in my teenage years, but I came from a very chaotic childhood. And when I found the Marine Corps, it was something that put structure and strength into me. And the saying for the Marines was, pain is weakness leaving the body. And I really internalized that. And so every day I went into the Marine Corps just trying to find a way to make my weakness into strength. And I faltered every single day, but I put up a pretty good facade. My call sign was "Look at me, I need attention," or Lamina. And so if that gives you any insight of what my personality might have been, it was very boisterous in order to hide a very insecure person. And it wasn't until I became a mother that things started to unravel. And then it wasn't until the pandemic came and I was out of the service and I had lost my identity and I had lost my career. And then I had a bunch of family tragedies happen that I just couldn't keep up with the facade anymore.
What was some of the chaos that you experienced when you were a child?
I had repressed a lot of it for a long time. I knew some key events. I had been sexually abused as a young child, and I had no way to cope with that because I was either never believed or it was something too uncomfortable for the adults in my environment to handle. So I had to internalize that. My mother ended up into a pretty bad domestic violence relationship who used a lot of psychological abuse against both me and my mother. And so I deal not only with the sexual and also physical memories, but what I suppressed the most was the psychological abuse. And that wasn't something that I remembered until recently. And when you start to put those pieces together, you start to really build a much more broad picture of who you are, and it makes it a lot easier to have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah. As a parent now, for a kid out there that may be experiencing something like that, it's hard to imagine. Is there like a way that a child can get help in a situation like that? Or what advice would you give a kid who may be experiencing some of those similar things right now and they're kind of ignored by their parents? Like, what do they do? What would you suggest?
I wrote. In a vacuum of support, the only thing I found solace in was writing. And I kept all my writings. And that's why I'm sitting here today as somebody that's saying I'm writing a book, because it was the ability to re-access that part of my history that I had buried so deeply that allowed me to make sense of not only what I went through, but like why I am the way I am today, and also those things that might have appeared like choices. But as I said earlier, I don't believe I was ever really acting with choice. everything felt very reactionary when I finally started to put the pieces together. So I sit here today feeling like I have choice now because I understand what I went through.
That's powerful because like knowledge and understanding is a huge part of healing. When we don't really know what's going on within us, it's hard to heal. So I had developed PTSD from seeing all kind of violence, but specifically an event where my best friend killed himself in front of me, as close as you and I are. And I had all these things, nightmares, feelings of violence, all these different things. And once I like started to study and learn about psychology, I learned that this was a thing and that I had this exact thing I was learning about. And then I could start the healing process, start to do things that worked for me. So it's so important that we educate people, young people especially. First of all, create a safe space for them to communicate, and then educate them on stuff that they might be going through so that they can then put a name to it and then start to work on it. But as you said, like when you go through life and you don't even know what's wrong with you, then you start feeling like you're wrong. You're to blame for all the stuff that's happening to you. Like, no, it's other things, it's situations, it's, growing up in certain environments, trauma, all these different things that contribute to that. So is that one of the reasons that your childhood and what you went through, was that one of the reasons why you went to the military when you were 17?
Definitely. I was trying to escape a lot of bad things and a lot of bad cycles that I could see myself stuck in. And I looked at it also, as a practical matter, I was a post 9/11 kid. I was driven by a desire for standing up for American values and our beliefs. And I also didn't have the ability to go to college and pay for it, without going into student loan debt like the rest of my peers. And it was the economic crisis. And so I chose the thing that looked like my savior. But the thing about saviors is often they're false prophets. And the Marine Corps really hurt me. I could write a book about it, which I probably will.
Right.
And I can say, to relate to your story, my last week in the Marine Corps was probably the hardest of my entire career. And without going into details, I had a Marine that committed suicide, somebody that I felt extremely responsible for. Like I should have been able to do something differently to save this person. And their loss was so triggering because they were also somebody that I related to on many levels, particularly around trauma. And I was so triggered by it. But it wasn't just the loss of this person. It was being able to relate to this person, being able to empathize with this person. And going back to what I've forgotten about myself was, at one point in time, how much I would have been that person during parts of my youth. And I didn't realize the depth of my own depression until I was able to read what I had written when I was a teenager. The first writings I have start when I'm about 11. And so to have that insight on yourself really does give peace to those spiraling thoughts of, why do I feel this way when something happens?
Writing is truly healing. That's the same thing I'd used to get through my hardest times of my life. Who introduced you to that? How did you find like writing as a thing for you?
I was very, very young. My mother likes to tell a story of, I wrote a story, like a picture book that was like 101 things to do with Peeps for Easter. I have books that I wrote from second grade and bound them for school projects and stuff. And my earliest book involves a story of suicide. And it was something that I submitted to my class in 6th grade. And I have a note from my teacher that says, "You're a beautiful writer. You're going to go places with this talent. but never once did somebody ask why a 6th grader was writing about a friend committing suicide.
That's a great question, right? Because they identified something, a gift that you have, but they saw the gift, but they didn't see what was the message within the gift.
Right. And I read that book today and
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. Like, I know all the hidden messages that I was putting in that writing at that time. I was desperate for somebody to just say what was wrong. And then sometimes people do ask you what's wrong, and maybe those are the glimmers that keep you going throughout dark times.
So you leave the military, right? Then what? Where do you go? Because you've created an identity, right? You're in the Marines. You're a Marine, and would you say you're still a Marine?
I definitely had a hate-love relationship with it. You know, there is that saying, like, once a Marine, always a Marine. And yes, definitely. But there's a bit of discomfort at times with that identity because I had to sacrifice so much of myself in order to make that identity possible. And I wish I didn't have to do that. I wish I could have been safer in my environment. But I think that all the training that I went through, most of it being centered around stress inoculation, going through infantry-centric training, having to carry a 240 Golf when all the other guys in my fire team had an M16. You know, having to really experience some hard, not only physical challenges, but peers being like just tearing you apart, and leadership not being there to support you when you're struggling, and the mental stress of failure. And then as you're going through training, eventually your training becomes operational. And suddenly it's not just a hypothetical of life or death. It's a no shit, life or death flight. And while I would not claim to be somebody that experienced, you know, any direct combat by any means, that doesn't mean that the constant stress of being in the military, or especially being an aviator, and then I would say especially being a woman in a male-dominated field, didn't leave me unscarred.
Yeah, that's a powerful message for people who are or have been in you know, serving. Also, that like it doesn't matter that you didn't go and see combat and kill people. Like, you're still experiencing a lot of the trauma that comes with being involved in that, because you're amongst the environment. You never know when you might go, and you're running into people who've been, and it's like you're having to live like, what if that's me, and what do I got to do? I have to get into that mindset. So that's a really important message there. I feel the Marines, it offers a lot of good for people. Like, you know, just earlier, you know, you said you had to carry the big gun. I saw you earlier moving furniture around on your own. I'm like, that's great. And you're just like you seem like you're a go get it done type of person.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's go, let's do it. I don't want to wait for nobody to help me. I got this. That's great. That's awesome. But what is like something maybe the Marines can do to improve? Like, if you had the authority to change something, and I feel like everything could be improved and changed in some way, what would that be? You've been there as a woman. What can be done better?
I would say not give up on the inclusivity of leadership. There's a lot of naysayers about making sure that things are fair and distributed across leadership. And I would say that we all need an equal chance at being leaders.
Absolutely. Doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like, you can be a leader.
Yeah.
Right? And it should be fair.
And you can bring new perspective and look at things differently. And like, we're just missing so much of that these days, is the ability to have different perspectives. And our perspectives all come, you know, because of who we have been throughout our lives. And, you know, understanding that we might shed many skins throughout our lives, and all of those experiences build, you know, who we are.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to have these conversations, and we need to be able to like make all of our differences more unifying.
Yeah. And you have an amazing family now, beautiful family, 2 daughters. Would you be okay if your daughters wanted to go to the Marines now?
I would hope that they wouldn't feel that they would need to. I certainly would support them in whatever their dreams were, but I know for me, going into the military wasn't my dream. I wanted to be a writer.
I mean, and you are a writer,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
You
But I
are.
had to go through the
Yeah.
shit, so to speak, first
Yep.
in order to put everything together. And, before we got on this interview, I mentioned, like, if it wasn't for the Marine Corps, I don't know where I would have ended up. And truly, like, there's an aspect of that of, if it wasn't for the Marines, my future looked bleak. And I don't know that I would be here today and being able to have these same kinds of enlightened conversations if it wasn't for going through even harder, even more on top of it. Because I felt like in some aspect, it was that training that allowed me to live. Because again, with so much of ourselves being here and not what other people see, we need tools to be able to think and to be able to interact in a stressful world. And if we're not training ourselves to have those tools, we fail ourselves,
Yeah. And you mentioned leadership. In your opinion, what do you think are some things that make a great leader?
Listening, the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, having decisiveness, not being able to, you don't want to leave somebody hanging on your whims or your inability to make a decision of your own. And so being able to just constantly condition yourself to be empathetic in everything that you do makes it easier for it to come more naturally, so that when you do have somebody that needs an answer from you, you're able to make that answer, but you're doing it with good judgment, and you're doing it with a bird's eye view, and you're doing it also from understanding what that one person is going through.
Yeah.
Which makes it really heavy.
It does. It does. Leadership, it could be lonely at
Very.
times, right? And it requires a certain level of like sacrifice, because you have to kind of, as a leader, you kind of take all the blame and responsibility when things go wrong. And then you really don't get much credit when it goes right, because a leader understands that it's about empowering the people around them and creating a situation for them to achieve success. Because it's one thing for a person as an individual to be successful and do things, but it's another thing when you can help other people do that. That's a real form of leadership. And as a mother, you're a mother, and I feel like I have so much respect for moms. It's like the hardest job in the world and the biggest responsibility. And so much comes from that, from what I've observed. So you're a mother, you're a leader to your kids and to others. And so tell me about your family, like your daughters, and you smile when I mention them. I know this is so special to you. What are some of the things that you instill in them now, and that you will as they grow, to help them be better and to be able to deal with the pain that life is inevitably going to deliver?
Well, I'm a homeschool mom, and a huge part of pulling them from public school and bringing them into, not only my care as a parent, but my ability as an educator. I have an undergraduate in engineering, and I have a master's in business, and I'm a pilot. So I think I'm okay at being able to teach. And I do it also with my husband. So it's a shared responsibility, which I think is such a beautiful opportunity. But when it comes to what I'm instilling in my children, I mean, just them asking me questions about what they see on the news. My daughter the other day asked me about immigration, and she wanted to know why people would come here, first of all. She didn't understand the difference between coming here illegally or legally. And she didn't understand why we would want, we as a loose concept, would want those illegals to leave the country. And I mean, she's 8, but she's asking me these questions.
Yeah.
And so how do you answer that? And what I did is I told her a story. And I started with, well, imagine that you're a little girl in a family and you're very poor, and we know how the rest of that story goes. And I walked her through why people would leave their home because of violence and because of traumas and because of fear and because of poverty, why they would come here for opportunity and, you know, a safety, and why there would be people that would want them gone because of protection to our American ideals or economy or, you know, whatever those reasons might be. I tried to give her a broad overview. And then also like why those people being here are not necessarily bad things, because they're service workers and they help us with building homes and, you know, et cetera. And so, you know, to try to be very sensitive about that question and not just shut her down because I don't know how to explain it, but really trying to build her worldview that she's a very lucky little girl. She's so lucky, and I want my daughter to know how lucky she is without feeling guilty for it, because she's an empathetic enough person that she's going to grow up into somebody that's going to want a better world.
Yeah. And that's just because I'm thinking about her asking that same question, right? Had she been going to public school, she asked that same question to her teacher, right? The response she may have gotten can be completely throw her off, right? It could be completely false, or maybe go against what you're trying to instill in your children. So I get why the homeschool, I get why being so proactive, you and your husband, in teaching them. Because I know for a fact where I'm at in LA, there's so much going on in public schools, and it's really just scary. I mean, there's so much, I can go on and on about the things that I hear directly from kids that they're experiencing from the people there, the teachers there, and all this stuff. So it makes so much sense in a way. If you can, if you're in the position to do so, if you feel you can confidently do it, you and your family, your husband, or if you're a single parent and you feel like you can do it and you have support, homeschooling could be a really great option, I believe, in this world. Because those type of conversations right there, like that, make a huge difference in a kid's life, that deeper understanding. And that's probably why she's asking these questions at such a young age, because, you know, you guys are so hands-on with real world stuff that they need to know. So I think that's amazing. And I always wondered about that because I don't know anybody personally that does it besides you now, but it makes so much sense. And I even thought about it, like, you know, if I had kids and I was raising them, like, what would I do? Would I put them in private school? Would I put them in public school? Would I, you know, teach them myself? Would I hire like a tutor to come? I always consider these things. And at the end of the day, I realized that nobody's going to teach our kids really what they really, really need to know besides us. That's it.
Right.
And so I think that that's an important thing for people to know, that maybe if your kid is going to public school or private or wherever, still take that time to sit and talk to them, ask them questions, hear them out, listen to them. You know, don't just ignore them and breeze through something like it doesn't matter. Like, really give them understanding. That's how you help mold them into who they're going to be, the future.
Absolutely. The ability to have complex conversations with little people should never be underestimated, you know, and I guess there's a part of me that is almost somewhat appreciative for some of the people, even if they were bad people in my early life, because there was an interaction with my brain at a very young age that ultimately changed the way that I perceive the world. And that could have been used for bad, but instead, you know, I chose to interpret myself in something good. I'm always one, I used to love to play role-playing game, video games. And I always choose to be the good person. Like, and if I ever make a bad choice, like by accident, I always go back to my last resave point. Like, I just can't do it.
Yeah, it's so true. I think about prison for me and possibly going to the Marines for you is going through what we went through is really a gift in a certain way,
Right.
as bad as it might have been, because it put us in a situation where we had to really like deal with things that typical people probably don't deal with. And through that, we were able to grow and learn and become more resilient and even sometimes separate us from people. Like going to the Marines probably separated you from being pulled into a community of people who were going to send you down a road of destruction. And same with me, going to prison put me in an environment with very bad people, but it took me away from a family that was dysfunctional, that had like a limited mindset. And had I grown up in that, I wouldn't be who I am today if I never went to prison. And I didn't see it in the moment, in the struggle, but now I realize, man, that was like a gift, because now my whole perspective on life is different. I appreciate everything so much more than I would have had I not been through that. And just relationships and connections and everything. And so to me, I look at it as a gift now. And so people out there that are going through something and they're dealing with something like maybe we have or worse, what would you tell them? What would you tell those people that may be feeling like giving up and they're just on the edge, right? They're on the edge and they're ready to give up on life.
Well, I've definitely been there. You know, after the pandemic, I found myself without an identity. My mother had a brain tumor, and she ended up having to live in our house with us. She still lives with us, and we're a happy family now, but that does not mean that it was easy in the beginning. I was completely disconnected from my husband to the point of it being a complete rupture. I had been dealing with extreme postpartum depression. I couldn't connect with my kids. I never felt present when I was with them, and I was just constantly triggered. And, you know, I would be lying if I said there weren't days where I just wanted to get into the car and drive away and never come back, or worse, drive away into something that wouldn't allow me to come back. And those moments are the moments of our break age. And I think when we're not in that moment of breaking, so if you're listening to this podcast, you're not breaking in this moment, right? It's what we're doing to practice now so that when we do get to those moments of breakage, we make the right decision. It's like I said about leadership. So it's leadership within ourselves, right? If you are constantly practicing to say, you know, these are my boundaries. If I get to this point, this is how I want to behave, or this is what I want to see myself do. Or, you know, if I'm feeling triggered, I'm going to let my partner know that I'm going to step away from that conversation so it doesn't escalate into a fight. Or if I'm having to constantly avoid a conversation with my parent because of some unresolved conflict that I'm afraid of discussing with them, finding a way to either deal with that or maybe discuss it with them. And just in our strong moments, thinking about how we are going to be prepared for our weakest moments, I think will allow us to build those brain connections, you know? Mm-hmm. When you're learning to fly an airplane, you don't immediately get into an airplane, right? You practice first. And even before you get into a simulator, you do what's called chair flying. And you literally sit in a chair, and sometimes you take a paper of your cockpit and you print it out, and you will sit it right in front of you, and you chair fly. And you go through your checklist, you know, battery on, master power on, avionics, master switch on, you know, engine, whatever. And you go through just in your head. And I think that those chair flying skills are something that we can just do every day for the things we know are our weakest reactions.
That's a great analogy, a great way to put it, right? You just don't jump in the plane and go, right? But not many people don't know what steps come before that. You think, oh, maybe you go into like a virtual reality, but but to sit in a chair with a paper printout
Yeah.
is so like
Elementary.
yeah, but that's such a real thing that sometimes you have to break it down all the way to the lowest common, factor that you can get to and say, I'm going to start here. I'm going to start right here at this low point and work my way up. Many people don't have the discipline and patience for that, right? What do you say to people, young people especially, because a lot of young people listen to this podcast that just don't have patience and want everything quick, on instant gratification? Like, what do you say to those people?
The most beautiful moments in life are the ones that are slowest. And I think we need to be more mindful about where we're spending our time and our energy. And I look back at, my 20s, and the moments that stuck with me the most are like the moments I went running with my dog. Like the moments that I used to like treat myself to go get coffee. The moments that I used to go driving just to listen to the radio and decompress. And so, reminding yourself that like you have to take care of you. The world is going to chew you up and spit you out. And if you don't take care of yourself first, you can't rely on somebody else to do that, or an institution to do that. And so take the time and enjoy your life before you try to, find gratification somewhere else.
Yeah. Enjoy yourself, enjoy your personal time, enjoy building yourself, learning, reading a book, writing. Those things are practices that will never lose value. And it disciplines you. Just like meditation, just sit there and to just be still is very hard for somebody who's always trying to go, which is why I do it. That's really the only reason why I do it, to be honest, is because I'm the person that just wants to go all the time. But then I also know that, all right, well, I need to maybe keep my mind in check and say like, yeah, we have that mentality, but if I want to stop as I can. So that's for me what I do, and I do my own personal practices. And so for each individual, it's different. People, learn yourself and you'll know what works for you, and try different things. It's kind of like my thing, like my message is, you don't really know unless you start trying stuff, right? You can visualize, you can imagine, you can watch things, but until you get in it, you won't really know if it's for you, right? So just get in there and get started.
My daughter, the other night, we were going to bed, and she had watched a video on black holes and time travel and time relativity. And so my 8-year-old is telling me about how time travel is technically possible. And she goes, the thing is you have to be moving slower. And she goes, so Mommy, if we just move slower, does time travel slower for us too? So we get to have more time with each other? And I said, yeah, it does.
Wow. That's such a beautiful thing, and it's so like profound for a young mind, right?
I know. She gets me all the time. I could have a quote book of like, philosophy by an 8-year-old.
You said you're writing a book. Tell us about that. What inspired you, or what got you going on the process of writing? The big battle, the big mountain that as a writer, it's required to complete a book. It's
yes.
so challenging for you. Tell us about that. Tell us about your book and where you want to go with it, and what is it about, if you want to. It just as much as you can about your book, because I'm really interested in it, and I hope that you get it finished soon so that I could read it.
Yes, I'm working diligently on it. It's been really complicated. It started with a letter that I wrote to someone very important to me. And in that letter, I reconnected with a part of myself that I had completely buried. And what was there was not only just the words, but the way of writing, the lyrical way of putting my thoughts down on paper becomes not filtered. It's not the way I would generally speak. And I had spent so much of my life just being, knowing what to say, and so then saying it, to have this sudden reconnection with my self-reflectiveness. I had stopped journaling. I had stopped writing. Basically, I joined the Marine Corps, and all of those habits that I should have kept up with as a young person went to the wayside because I wasn't disciplined in my self-care routine in the early days. And ultimately, that led me to going to this rupture point. And I started really deciding to write a book when my life had gotten a little chaotic, just put it lightly. You know, I had experienced such a profound depression and such a significant loss in my life and I had also been so regimented. And since I was 18, you know, like I had never smoked pot. Yeah. Like since I was like 17 years old, and I decided to join the Marine Corps, and suddenly I was in the civilian world, and I wasn't having to report to anybody anymore, and I was dealing with all of these mental health challenges and unresolved PTSD, and I had my mother living with me who, you know, brought up a huge amount of unresolved childhood trauma and just all of these things and people back in my life that were bringing up, you know, emotions that I had suppressed. And, you know, I decided to say, fuck it. And I literally burned my life to the ground, everything. And I had so much fun doing it. And I did it with my husband. And that's really ultimately what started me wanting to take my writing from my past and putting it into a narrative, because I realized that what I was doing was always intentional, even if it looked crazy on the outside. But with intention, you know, is nothing more than me seeing my own reactions to the world and saying, you know what, this is what I'm going to make of that. I'm not going to let these bad, you know, things that I let happen to myself not allow me to take power of that narrative and turn it into something that helps other people.
Yeah. And you've told your story, you know, before, this isn't the first time. And many people go through experiences similar to ours, but keep it to themselves. They don't feel like they want to, or they don't feel they can, or they're afraid, or they don't even know how to tell their story. Why is it important for you to tell your story now?
I think because of what I had to admit, not only to myself, but to my husband and to my mother. I was carrying secrets of things that I had gone through, things that had happened to me, and things that I held certain people responsible for, and carried a huge amount of guilt and resentment and shame. And so, you know, I can't actually say I was really even writing a book until very recently, because I was still writing something inauthentic, because I still hadn't had those conversations with the people of whom my book really surrounded my story around. Because while it is a fictional novel, there's a lot of things that have been altered. It is based on my life. I would say all of our lives are far too complicated and at times don't need to be fully documented. So that's why it's not a memoir. And also I want to, you know, protect the authenticity of what it is to have a good story, right?
Yeah.
The good story is what I'm all about. And so I think that coming back to knowing what we have in our heads, if it's eating at us, finding a way to allow that space to breathe so it doesn't eat at yourself and destroy you completely.
Yeah, because like holding those things in is like you're just building it up, and then eventually you blow up, right? You explode, you do something that you can't ever take back, or worse, you end up hurting yourself, others, or passing away because of this.
Or your children.
Yeah, or your children. And it's because people build up things and all this trauma they've experienced, and they hold on to it and they don't get it out there and share it and seek help. And, you know, telling those things is very healing and it's very empowering for others. So being that you're telling us I'm truly grateful that you accepted the offer to be on the podcast. And so what's next for you? What do you want to accomplish for your future and for your
Besides
family?
breaking generational trauma?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Long-term goals.
Right?
I think for the short term, I'm interested in building a community around these kinds of conversations and entering into community of like-minded people. I think we oftentimes feel very alone in our experiences, and something that's been extremely eye-opening for me as I've begun to share my story is how many people have started to reach out to me. And, you know, I'm not a mentor in a way of, you know, doing it for anything other than like, I just enjoy hearing people have something to vent to. And not that I want everybody to send me their trauma stories, but there is some very, very powerful things, self-reflections that I've had through having these connections made of like, wow, I'm actually making a difference in a trickle of people's lives. And, you know, I do bring it all back to my kids, because at the end of the day, if I didn't put myself through what I put myself through and heal from it, I don't think I would have been able to not pass on, you know, some of my challenges to my children. I don't think that, you know, I wouldn't be as patient as I am with them now. If they ask me a question, I might want to shut them down because I'm just so mentally exhausted with my own stuff that I don't have the capacity to explain immigration to them. So, you know, I think we have a responsibility as people that might be parents someday or are parents to get free space in our head so that when we do have those little people looking at us, we're able to say, you know, I'm not going to physically harm you when I'm triggered. I'm not going to raise my voice at you when I'm upset. I'm not going to ignore you because I'm too busy with my own problems that I can't handle yours. We owe it to our children to become better adults.
And to help them live a better life than we did, right? And to be more equipped to deal with the things in life that we may have not have been equipped to deal with. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Taking a turn into, I would say, a different direction, but in a way it's relatable because it's all about, you know, our perspective on things. I was listening to a podcast on my way over here, and it was talking about the times we're living in, and then, you know, the future, the very near future we'll all see, as long as we're alive, we'll see within the next 10, 20 years. But like, with all the stuff going on in the world, we all see it, right? With everything from technology and AI, social media, politics, you know, elections, like all these things. How important are the times that we're living in now? You know, some people say this is the most important time in human history, these times right now, because of the integration with artificial intelligence and all these things. I'm kind of like, I'm like to the science stuff, and I listen to all these things, and I've always been kind of a futurist in a way, a little bit, like always trying to think of things that possibly could be. But like, how important are the times we're living in right now? And where do you see things going, and where would you like to see things going? Like, people as a whole, or maybe some Americans, you know, like what is your view on that?
Well, I certainly think we have an opportunity to make this the most important time in human history. I would say that the fact that we have so many tools available to us to help heal ourselves, we're doing ourselves a disservice if we're not taking advantage of those tools. Now, I did something really interesting that if somebody does this that listens to this podcast, please reach out and tell me. I wrote all my journals. I transcribed my journals to a Word document, and then I uploaded them to ChatGPT.
Wow.
I could start asking it questions about analyzing behaviors or emotions or relationships, and it gave me back huge amount of insight. So I think that we are standing on the precipice of the ability to have a mass enlightenment. And I'm somebody, I love history. I love history. I'm very, inspired by these movements that have happened throughout humanity, where you have these groups of people that have come together and they have changed the course of history. But the problem is that they're limited in terms of their reach, right? Because they didn't have technology. They were often, ostracized by, usually opposing either political sides or religious institutions that wanted to shut them down. There is always a lack of, funding and whatnot for any kind of change to society. But what we have right now is an opportunity for more people than not to get to a point that we are in now, where it's just being able to kind of see it, the balcony view of the world, and not just saying like, okay, I'm here, I'm Alisa Sieber in my neighborhood, I have these people around me and this is my life, but rather like, who am I in the grand scheme of my community, of my country, of myself as a parent, as a family member, and making sure that we feel alignment in all of those identities, and trying not to have such an individualistic mindset, but reminding ourselves that we are a part of a global universe, and it's important to heal ourselves so that we can provide the opportunity for more people to come up with us.
Yeah, wise words, definitely. And I agree. And I talk to like a lot of like people that are like CEOs and presidents of companies, and people that are are in the midst of all this change going on, like with AI and all these advancements in technology. And I ask them like, where does it all like lie in their business, in their future? Because they have to think about stuff and make decisions based on like what's the best case scenario for them so that they can be successful, right? So when I ask them questions like, where do you see your company in 5-10 years? Is it automation? Is it robots? Is it, fully incorporating AI, and there's people that are going to not have jobs because of that? Most of them, without even hesitating, agree yes, because their goal is the success of what they've built, or what's been passed on to them, is for them to be successful in their company. So they're going to do whatever needs to be done to make sure that happens. And if another company is utilizing all these tools and things that are out there and they're not, then they're dead. So it's like survival in a way. So it's like we're forced into having to learn this stuff. Whether you use it or not, you better learn it. You better learn the best way you can integrate with it in some way and use it for your advantage, because if not, you're going to get left behind, and it's a disaster at that point. So it's very interesting how I found unique ways people are using this. And for you to mention that with the book, that's incredible, because there's certain things that it can see that you may have not even seen in your writing, or things that it can pick up that you can learn from for your own healing, but then you can use to help others. That's a beautiful way of using technology for the good. And I think that people who have like this idea that it's just all bad are kind of like, are in a fixed mindset. Every time we've evolved, there's always been people that are saying, this is bad, this is not good, this is going to be the disaster. Every big movement, the Industrial Revolution, the internet, all these things. And I think it's the people that adapt and that learn how to use it for the best way are the ones that end up becoming the most successful, right? So I think it's a very important thing, and teaching kids that, right?
I integrate AI into my homeschool lessons. In fact, I'm working on a project with my daughters called Imaginary Me. So kind of following this idea of what I've done for my book, which is writing a fictional character that, follows based on real events, or based on real traumas, or my real, personality or whatever, to use that as a tool to understand myself better, right? It's not just I'm writing this, it's me for like other people to interpret. It's me writing this so that I can interpret myself back. And I think there's a huge amount of power in being able to teach young people how to do self-reflective, either journaling or fictional writing, depending on what they're interested in. But what I'm doing with my children is structuring out a project-based English lesson that goes through character development, goes through plot development, goes through scene development, while also saying, hey, what is a real life problem that you're experiencing that we can integrate into this story? Or what are some real life fears that you have that maybe your character can overcome? Or what are some real life, adversities that maybe you've experienced that we can work through understanding why they happened in the first place? And by structuring out these pieces, I'm working on how to build that into AI to then take their ideas and generate an age-appropriate children's story for them to read back. And so it's a bit of, this parent-child interaction, because you're engaging in their creativity, you're asking about to their imagination and what's going on in their head. It's also you using technology as the parent, because you kind of have to figure out how to write these prompts, but then you're also teaching your kid how they can use artificial intelligence to kind of accelerate their own creative minds.
Yeah, that's
so
amazing.
I love using it in a way that is productive and insightful and helps us make better sense of what's going on in here with just a little bit of third-party perspective, even if it's not real.
Right, exactly. Because it's built from all
an aggregate learning language.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm truly just excited at times. I'm also very nervous, but there is a very big excitement about living in this time of seeing so much change in our technologies, and just hoping that there will be people in the world that will want to protect and see the growth and not let it go to some place that could set us backwards as a society. We need to take care of the people that are going to be negatively impacted, right?
Yeah.
We have to have plans in place for how our technology is going to shift our society, and some sort of guardrails to prevent the worst from happening.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to know what those worst things are, they could read some books or look back at history.
Yeah.
And let's not repeat the cycle.
Yeah, exactly. What are some ways people can find out more about you, connect with you, learn about what you do, all that, like maybe get in touch with you? I don't know if you're open to that. Like for people out there who may and probably will want to know more about you and what you do and what you're going to do and where you're at in life.
Well, I'm on Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn and YouTube. It's Writing by Alisa, like writing by Alisa, and also on my website, writingbyalisa.com.
Okay, and all that will be in the description as well for people that want to find you and be in touch and follow you and get your book when it's done. Final words?
I think my final words are, don't be afraid to go to the darkest places of you, because if you never go there, you're never going to be able to see true light.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.